a hello to the audience that are watching us, that are listening to us. And I think that I'm again going to catch on the, the subject that we all spoke about, the pause, being a little bit more patient with things. I think that is somewhat connected to our topic of discussion today. So I think I can already, see a lot of, read a lot of familiar names in the audience, and I know that some of them are probably, students, emerging talents, people all from the industry who are intrigued and who are curious to know what we are talking about today. So I think without waiting much further, I'm quickly going to do an introduction to all the wonderful panelists. And after which we'll start with the questions. We'll also have a segment towards the end of the webinar where we will allow the audience to ask a couple of questions on the chat. So don't worry. If you have any questions, and you can wait till till the end, probably the last 20 minutes, 25 minutes, we'll come back to you and we'll definitely ask you to come up with your questions, which will be asked to the panelists. So starting with the introduction, I'm going to start with Nitin because he's on my extreme left. So Mr. Nitin Chordia. He's the founder of CocoTrade, and he's also a certified chocolate taster. Nitin, do you want to tell the audiences a little bit about your brand CocoTrade quickly?
Sure. So, CocoTrade is a bean to bar chocolate brand, which is kind of the farm to fork concept, where on one hand we work with farmers sourcing cocoa beans from them, and then we take them through the process of making chocolate, making, and then finally package it as a sustainable luxury product. Now, when we started off in 2019, of course, the pandemic hadn't happened, and chocolates and luxury was synonymous in a very different way. But I think as we've moved forward, there have been some realizations both from the audiences as well as from the trade that, sustainability becomes quite an inclusive mixture into the luxury business. And I think we find ourselves somehow in the right position now. So it's a brand that is completely Indian, very proudly Indian, doesn't use any ingredient that is imported, and doesn't use any equipment that is imported to make chocolates that are as good as imported. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you. And just for the audience's benefit, I have just quickly mentioned the name on the chat because it's spelled differently. It's CocoTrade with a K. So if anyone wants to research and Google on it further, you can. Thank you, Nitin. Moving on to Atif. So Atif, I think we've known each other for a very, very long time. And I think it's been amazing. He's been a dear trainer to us, training all our students. He's been a mentor. He has founded this community called RE. Atif, is it RE or is it Ray? It's RE. No, you're on mute. Unmute.
Sorry, yeah. It's RE.
It's RE.
The smallest indivisible part of recycling. Yes, RE.
So I like to think of Atif as a philanthropist. He always has amazing thoughts, amazing ideas. And Atif, if you can maybe tell the audience a little bit about what is RE, that'll be nice for them to draw on.
Sure. So RE is, we like to think of it as a new clothing culture. We like to think of ourselves as people who are constantly exploring in the space of recycling being our primary avenue, where we try and draw inspiration for all of our design. And RE, as the word is, it's all about going back to the start. So we're all about circular structures and creating products that tomorrow can create circular economy and conscious consumption patterns.
So it's creating that full circle, that
Yes.
concept of coming back, and
Absolutely.
closing that circle, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Atif. Now on to Neeti. Neeti Mehra, guys, CEO and curator, Beej Living, which is a guide to slow living in India. Neeti, again, I'd like to give you the opportunity to explain everybody about Beej Living a little bit, because even for me, when I first got to know of it from Abhay, I was really, I was like, what is this? How does someone come up with this? And what is it about? So can you tell the audiences a little bit about what is Beej Living? Beej as in the seed, guys. So Beej Living. You're on mute. You guys have to get used to the mute, unmute, but yes, Neeti.
So it's really interesting because a lot of times when I introduce the brand to people, people think about beach living and they're so excited. But I tell them, no, it's a seat. So just to give a little bit of my background, I've been a journalist in the luxury industry for 18 years. And Abhay knows when I joined the luxury industry, in a way, he was a guide and a mentor. And after 18 years, I just felt that I had to do so much more. I wasn't digging deep enough in what homegrown luxury was in making an impact. So I turned to, I was studying, I was doing folk culture, I did CSR, I was studying yoga and tantra. And then I felt that, there was a need, there was a gap in the market for looking at traditions, but in the modern context and creating new traditions for the future. So I started Beach as a discovery platform, and what we do on Beach is, we educate people about the traditions and, indigenous cultures in India. We're building a community of people who are like-minded, who would be interested in this. And we are also, educators. We tell people how to live a slow life, how to live mindfully. And I'm a slow coach also. So I also do sessions which help people achieve that. And another fourth thing which I do on the side is also I work with conscious brands. I help them with the communication strategy. I help them, communicate and build their brand pillars and actually, get what they're speaking about to the audience. And we tell stories across all spectrums. There will be Nanita Dongre on Beach Living. There will also be Ashok Bishnoi, who is the founder of this NGO called Charkha, who actually created camel hair wool blankets during the lockdown. And we have other people like, Kini Sandhu, who's growing indigo in Terai. So we have a mix of stories from India, which, speak about what people are doing at the grassroots level, plus what brands are also doing. And also, this health, there's wellness, there's a lot of other things also. So that's what we're trying to curate. And it's very curated, it's not something which, we carry a lot of people and brands which no one would have heard of. And, we also discovery platform because our aim is, to tell people that this is what India is about. This is, what Indian grassroots luxury is about, and pick up small stories from here and there, which can really make a difference in people's lives.
Thank you, Neeti. Moving on to Abhay. I think what should I start with? Because there are so many different ways to introduce you. So I think, mentor, author, coach, luxury expert. There are so many ways to, introduce Abhay in this. I think he's one of the most well-known and popular luxury, informants and industry insiders that I've known to look up to since so many years. So Abhay Gupta, founder and CEO, Luxury Connect. And also LCBS, Luxury Connect Business School. Abhay, I'd like to, maybe for you to tell the audiences a little bit about what you do, and also recently the book that you wrote on luxury. So very quickly, if you could give us an introduction to yourself and to your work.
Sure, Smita, thank you. That was a very kind introduction coming from you. Well, guys, as Smita and Neeti rightly said, I've been donkey's years in the luxury business in India. I probably initiated it all way back when there was no retail market. Nevertheless, my last stint was with a brand called Versace. I was a country head for brands like Versace, opening 8 stores for them until I started my organization called Luxury Connect. We needed to be a consulting with a differentiator of focus on talent, and hence the vision of creating India's first and only luxury business school, which is LCBS, was also formed and formulated in the year 2012. As Smita said, in the recent past, 2019, I wrote a book on Indian luxury because I've been an avid writer and a blogger, and that's how I came in contact with Neeti when she was the editor for what is now called the Lux Book, and we just sort of stayed in contact since then. So I had been writing on and off since 2012, and then 2018 I realized that in order to sort of consolidate all the information that I have up in my head, if I can sort of put all of that down into a book, it can help a lot of students, a lot of brands, a lot of people, a lot of educationists, and general public. So the book is called Incredible Indian Luxury Bazaar. It's been out in the market. It talks about the historical part of luxury in India, the past, present, and future of luxury. We're also looking at how do we sort of touch up to the 180 billion projection made by Amitabh Kant. But of course, the COVID has been a bit of a misnomer. So we have an economic model in the book through which we are trying to say that if we are a 5 trillion economy, then it's very easy for us to do 180 billion luxury. It should not be a very far away thing. It also talks about what can be a success model for a brand. So all in all, it's a very comprehensive book for anything and everything to do about luxury in India. Smita, thank you very much for having me on the panel. And then let's go ahead and start.
Yes, absolutely. So without more wait, let's start. So obviously, as the topic pretty much says it all, we are talking today about elevated essentialism in luxury and what that means. Obviously, when we talk about luxury is one of the first industries that takes a hit during the time of crisis, because it's not considered as an industry which looks into essentials. But post the pandemic or during the pandemic, a little bit of that outlook towards luxury and towards good living, towards conscious living, towards living, that less is more approach, buying less but buying better. So that better buying principle has come, about amongst people, and we are seeing that happening globally. So we are here today to discuss that with all of you and to talk to you all about that, and also to get an opinion or maybe to get a point of view from you. What do you think about it? So my first question to all of the panelists is, luxury brands always evangelize exclusivity and the need for something that goes beyond one's reach. However, today, especially amid the pandemic, we have noticed a lot of luxury brands also going into essentials. For example, Louis Vuitton with its mask range. What's your take on that? Because when you talk about masks today, I think it's the most important essential. And for a luxury brand to have done that, so what is your stand on that? Do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's a bad idea? Anyone who wants to jump in first?
Sure. Can I take that?
Sure. Yes, Abhay. Yes.
So I think we first need to define what is essential and what is luxury. So whatever was luxury at one point in time has become essential today. Mm-hmm. If let me try to explain that. Historically speaking, if you go 50 years back into history in India, post-independence, maybe in the 60s, having a refrigerator was luxury. In the 70s, having a car was luxury. In the 80s, having an air conditioner was luxury. In the 90s, having your own apartment was a luxury. And in 2000s, it's having a peaceful home and a peaceful environment is luxury. So the fact remains that what was essential, what was luxury a few years back is essential today. So if you look at a mask as a product, then I do recall that several years back, even when I used to visit Japan, you would never find a Japanese without a mask and without a hand sanitizer. It's like second skin to them. And even if they came to India, they were always wearing a mask and they always had a sanitizer. And we sort of used to make fun of them. So for them, because they had probably faced a similar situation post the atom bomb, it had become essential for them and it was luxury for us. Now it is becoming essential. So for a brand which is eventually looking at commerce, they have to get into what the people need. So I believe that there is a connection between, while we say that luxury begins where necessity ends, but we believe that, I personally believe that there is a connection between necessity and luxury. We cannot just sort of debar or separate the two. That's my take on that.
So what you're also saying is that it's okay for luxury brands at times to cross that line a little bit or go on the other side a little bit if they feel that it's not going to hurt their brand image, or it's the way it's done probably is very important, the way it's marketed or the way it's treated or the way they're talking about it,
Absolutely, because their consumers also need a mask. So Louis Vuitton is only doing service to their consumer. It's a lifestyle. So they are producing a mask which is of the most superior quality. And so everything else about the luxury brand DNA remains intact. But if the client today needs a mask, then for me to say, hey, go to some XYZ brand and buy a mask is not making sense. Then I'm not being loyal to my customer.
So basically, they need to be more inclusive, and they need to also maybe by doing this, they are showing that they are more courteous or they are more polite. So I think probably the key here is how they communicate about the fact that they are getting into this category and why they're getting into this category. What's the purpose? So if they do it with a purpose, then I think it makes sense.
Sure.
So if nobody else has anything to add,
Smita,
yes,
I love what Abhay said. I also feel in the last couple of years, just looking, I mean, from your Louis Vuitton example, the creative director behind a lot of that conversation is Virgil Abloh. And there are lots of people who are coming into that conversation in luxury right now who are changing that conversation. We're asking the question, what is luxury? And that's what divides this answer from what is essential to what is non-essential, because suddenly the idea of luxury is changing. People are wanting to go beyond what is stated as luxury, because there were French fashion houses that sort of ruled that space and said, this is luxury, and everyone believed it. And yes, I mean, I'm just talking about it from a tangent. Yes, it is about what access you can or cannot get. So it depends on where you are, on what economic sort of scale you stand. So that defines your access. But even other than that, conversationally or conceptually, there are questions being asked on what is luxury, same as what is art. So when there is a diversity in the answers that's coming, it reflects in the product that is being made. So when a person like Virgil Abloh is asking what is luxury and therefore bringing streetwear to a brand like Louis Vuitton, it changes the conversation for luxury as well as a product line. We don't just see it as a bespoke cut suit anymore.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So,
Yes,
Smita,
Atif. Yes, Nitin.
My personal opinion on this is that it was a fantastic use of a great business opportunity. It was just happened to be pandemic, let's keep that aside. But if you look at for a brand, no matter if it's a luxury brand or not, it's just an opportunity to which you very clearly mentioned in the beginning that when there's a pandemic or any such event, luxury normally takes a back seat, right?
Yeah.
And that is an expectation usually. So by doing what LV did, I think they've made themselves relevant even in this time of pandemic. And I think very well they've realized that they still are relevant. People are still spending on luxury, whether it's a pandemic or not, is just situational. So I think it's an extension, product extension, if you call it, which I think is a fantastic execution of an idea.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nitin, for your input.
So I have a different slightly, can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
So I have a slightly different view of this. What I see it is, it's a commodification of luxury, which we've been seeing as, perfumes have been out there. Now you have sneakers inside. Now you have this massification of luxury, which is out there. But all of this is really taking us away from the real meaning of luxury, which we traditionally know as something which is rare, something which is unique, and something which is handcrafted, right? I mean, that is what essentially luxury is. And as brands are shifting away from this, because, Kering and maybe LVMH are listed companies. They have board members, they have shareholders, they need to create marketable products which would sell. So all of this put together is actually moving brands away from, what luxury is. And it's actually moving away from the heart and soul of luxury, which is exactly what I said, it has to be handmade, it has to be rare, it has to be unique. And the problem with all of this is it is moving the artisan away from the center of the luxury conversation. And you've seen it happening, there's a certain amount of soullessness in the way things are being done. Burberry a few years ago burnt clothes and perfumes and, other accessories worth 100 million pounds. There were mink farms in Denmark, which are being reared for fur coats. And they were culled because of, the pandemic. And in India, only recently I read that in the New York Times that, we have embroidery units in Bombay, which were being patronized by luxury houses abroad. And they canceled orders or they reduced orders by 50 to 70%, affecting all the artisans working there. So I think we really need to see that, if you go more towards the massification of luxury, you actually have a real human cost to it. And I think that conversation is not coming up. People are looking at, they're actually being relevant to the situation. But we have to look at the deeper meaning of what they're actually doing on the side, which is affecting humans, it's affecting livelihoods, and it's affecting, the real definition of what luxury actually is. And India is actually a very artisan-based economy, in the next decade or so, we will probably lose all these artisans and all if they are not supported. If we go more towards mass, if we go more towards, making masks and other things on the side, there is this huge artisan economy, which is anyway suffering because of demonetization, because, of the migration which happened last year because of the lockdown. So I think these are deeper issues which we also need to consider.
Absolutely. So I think brilliant points raised, Neeti, but then again, there's always that balance that we keep talking about, that luxury brands must maintain their heritage, they must maintain their legacy. You kept speaking about the real definition of luxury, but when we talk about luxury, it is so subjective, and also subjective not only because of where the brands are coming from, but also where the consumer is coming from, especially today, because you have a global consumer, very traveled all around the world, coming from all parts of the world at or different ages, different lifestyles and everything. So everyone's definition of luxury changes with time, and as also Abhay said, with time, and also currently and constantly it's changing with what is happening around us. So but what I feel is you really have a point there, when you mentioned that we can't ignore, it's always that battle between old school and new school. So if a luxury brand is going through that transition, maybe they either take a stand and they say that we want to go this way and that's about it, or they say that we are going to stick to our roots and we're not going to go too much into the other side. But if a brand wishes to stay in between, then they really need to strike a balance. It is exactly like the way when we speak about e-commerce and brick and mortar. You can't not do either. You need to do both, and you can't look at one as...
So that is
Sorry.
fine, but I just feel that the human face of luxury should not be forgotten in any context. We know
Absolutely. I'm with
younger
you.
people are driving the market, and obviously they want the sneakers, they want the mask, they want your sweatshirts, and you want your Birkin bags with all these funky painters design.
Absolutely. I think there's no reason why we can't have a sneaker which is completely hand painted or coming with some kind of a hand, craftsmanship. So I think that marriage is very important. And you really, I think were brilliant with those points. Absolutely. So I think we're going to move to the next question, which is particularly to Abhay. So Abhay, what have been the recent shifts that you have seen in the luxury consumer behavior during this pandemic, and do you see the graph dynamically shifting towards a particular side? Again, this is quite drawing from what we just discussed. So what are the recent changes that you have observed in the luxury consumer behavior, particularly talking maybe about India, if I may ask you?
Well, Smita, so I think there are a couple of points which I want to share with the audience here.
Sure.
That over the pandemic, over the last 1.5 year, the kind of shifts that we are seeing in consumer behavior could be sort of as follows. Number one, the digital disruption of luxury and fashion is a reality today. So why only luxury and fashion? I think our complete lifestyle is disrupted with luxury, starting from waking up in the morning to what music to listen to, what movie to watch, when do I stand up, what calories am I eating. Everything has been completely disrupted and technology is taking over our lifestyle.
Absolutely.
So we cannot escape digital. So, or technology rather. Now, Neeti made a point that it needs to be handmade, but the fact remains that 3D printing and nanotechnology is also disrupting luxury. So are we dislocating the artisans? Somewhere down the line, I think we are also helping the artisans towards a more, let's say, if not a better quality may not be the right word, but towards a more, what should I say, a more regulated kind of a production. So a combination of technology and human interface is where the future seems to be going. So coming back to luxury, the digital disruption towards not only e-commerce or shifting towards AI, VR, or 3D walkthroughs or video walkthroughs, etc., is something which has been experienced in India as well as overseas. But what has happened is that with the digitization becoming so acute and the digital journey of the consumer being of prime importance, which has now become sort of interspread by, let's say, high quality communication, which is possible digitally, is being met with. The expectation of the customer at the store end is also rising. So customer experience, which is influenced by the digital journey. So as a result, what is happening is that earlier transactional sales, which are happening on the luxury stores, is now moving towards a more holistic, radically customer-centric approach. So those are the kind of things which are happening because the customer wants to zoom in and zoom out of the store because he's done his purchase decision digitally. Maybe the sales associate has also helped him to look at a close-up of the product. He's more or less finalized the product. It may be a Tiffany product, for example. He's made up his mind on the digital space. He has contacted the store. The store has made a video walkthrough for him, zoomed him onto the product, and given him all the download that he wants to know. So the customer wants to walk in to the store. He's scared of the unknown environment. So he wants to zip in and zip out. And during that small period, it is not just a transaction. It has to be the engagement which happens even before and after that. So that's a shift that is happening towards that. The second shift.
It's not about who they like more, which brand or which sales associate of the brand is able to communicate to them, better.
Absolutely. But this has also led to, since you're also in the talent space, this has also led to a dilemma because the talent is not yet geared for the digital disruption. So here's an IT department in a company or a large organization like LV or a Kering, which is dumping technology left, right, and center onto the store associates, but they are not yet geared to deal with that technology. So there is a gap there, and I think that's where the talent training shifts are going to happen. Second comment I would like to make in terms of shift in consumer behavior is what we discussed already. It is quality over quantity. So more and more people are looking at classic and traditional luxury sales making a comeback because people are questioning, why do I need 20 white shirts? So if I need a white shirt, let me choose the best and let me buy one instead of having 20 in my wardrobe. So in a way, it's the fast fashion or the low-hanging fruits within luxury or the accessible luxury products which are got affected, but the classic products are making a big comeback. Third point which I have noticed is that there is a heightened environmental and social consciousness as well as sustainability, which has become center stage now. So more and more people or more and more brands which were only lip servicing when it came to sustainability, they are unable to stay with that and they have to sort of deep dive into sustainability. And I think that is where Atif comes in, that recycle, upcycle, subscribe, share, reuse. Those are some of the new mantras.
Absolutely.
Last but not the least, the meaning and purpose of the brand is now making a very, very important point, because all of us know that when the COVID hit last year, it was the prime luxury brands like LV and Hermes and Gucci. They went into producing sanitizers and producing masks and PPE kits. They expressed solidarity and they expressed the people of the world that we are with you. Just because we are luxury doesn't mean that we don't care about you or care about planet. So the purpose of the brand is making it extremely required today, because the Gen Zers are the ones which are demanding this. And brands like LV and Hermes have got rewarded. If you look at the current sales figures of 21, these two brands are done well, and they have come back to the 19 figures already. So I think those are a couple of shifts which, in my opinion, are currently taking place in the luxury space.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that, Abhay. Moving on to Atif for my next question. Recently, we saw a lot of brands getting into the whole recycled, reuse space. Also brands who are in the luxury category. So recently, this Danish fashion brand Ganni launched a collection of, leisure wear, which is made completely out of recycled materials back in October 2020. Like them also, we have seen a lot of other luxury brands enter into recycled goods. So what is your take on that? How is that market, do you think that's a good market for luxury to get into? What's your opinion?
I think it's an obvious space for all product to get into. That's how I see it. It's more of a conversation of how are we going to design better for the future. That's where the recycled aspect comes in, or recycling is actually one part of that entire chain. It's also just a case of creating a product that is more considered so that the consumption can be more considered. Because the consumer who's coming in, like Abhay pointed out, is a consumer that is very, very interested in being informed.
Yeah.
So the story is not just about, so-and-so brand took inspiration from so-and-so destination, and therefore this exotic print has come forth, and that's what we're going to call luxury from now on, or for this season. The consumer wants more, because a consumer is invested into a lot more information themselves on the 500 platforms that they are sort of hooked into. So they want to know what goes beyond that print story. Who is the person who made it? How is it better for the environment, etc., etc. These are the questions that the consumer is asking, because they somewhere, like Abhay pointed out, the fact is that why do I need 20 white shirts? Why can't I just get that one? And if I have to get that one, then who should I get it from? Is it Burberry? Is it LV? Is it who? And if so, then why? And there are lots of fashion brands that are getting into this. Like you mentioned, one, Gucci is investing hugely into, recycling. They've got something called the Gucci Equilibrium. They've got their line of accessories, etc. Where I feel that it's interesting right now is it's creating a little bit of awareness. So we're able to actually have recycling as a terminology, even sort of used along with product lines these days, where it's not looked upon as a substandard raw material being used to make my product anymore. The idea is, it's recycled means, okay, there is effort put into this and there is some sort of thought put into this. Where I think the future of that is going to be how responsible is that thought. Because a lot of brands that are getting into it currently, the easiest way to get into it is to find the low-hanging fruit, where you take recycled polyester and you put it together and you put it out there, and it gives you a few sort of check boxes on your sort of sustainability to-do list as a brand. So you feel like you've saved a little water, you've saved a little energy. So, we're sustainable. But how responsible is it? So a lot of the brands currently, Gucci included, are doing product lines which are made out of recycled polyester or recycled nylon, which all are going to create microfiber that goes into our water stream every time that product comes in contact with water. And that goes and creates a bed of plastic on our oceans and is destroying our entire water life. So we have to have far more competent, involved, considered options in terms of what is the exact design solution to this. Is it just one quick fix and say recycled hair to sustainable hair, spend your top dollar on it? Or is it, so it's only the beginning. We're scratching the surface. That's how I see it.
Long way to go. Absolutely. Thank you, Atif. My next question is to Nitin. Nitin, in contrary to other industries within the luxury sector, the food industry, I think, is the primary category for consuming high quality goods faster, because it's obviously a fast moving category within the luxury segment. In such a segment, which is also quite saturated, how does a brand create a differentiation in the market to elevate their product, and how does it help to become like you mentioned about CocoTrade as well? So do you think the whole conscious brand, becoming conscious, becoming sustainable, taking care of your surroundings, do you think that helps in elevating the brand? What's your opinion on that?
Sure. So certainly we didn't look at pandemic as the opportunity to build upon our brand, right? We looked at it even before the pandemic,
right?
And what we realized even back then in 2019, we actually launched our brand in Amsterdam. Okay, it wasn't even launched in India when we started off, but we've seen a shift of consumer behavior and acceptance, even in India. But I just think that in the food segment, and I can speak about that a little bit more than I can about the other segments and other categories, is in the food segment, I think people have got very conscious. The fact that they want to save the planet somehow, the realization has kind of kicked in, and food gives you an opportunity to exhibit what you believe, right? So if you think that you want to be kind to the planet, charity should start from home, and it can start with food very, very easily.
Very easy.
So in the food business, I think it has given a lot of brands an opportunity to elevate their offering, make it more relevant to today's audiences. And I think largely that is an opportunity that is untapped. And for even very, very large corporates, and I'm talking about really large corporates, even like a HLL or Unilever, or even a P&G, people are thinking about sustainability to ensure that their offering is kind of looked at with a bit more premium lens.
Okay.
That's the situation we are in today. I'm not saying that is the way we need to necessarily look at it, but that's the situation we are today, where brands are saying, if we elevate ourselves by saying we are sustainable, we might hope to get or expect to get an elevated audience. But I think over a period of time, that will become a necessity. Like, Abhay said, today we're talking about it as a luxury and an opportunity. And tomorrow that becomes something that every brand needs to do. I think sustainability in the food business will catch on probably earlier than many other categories of luxury products. And people can put it into action much more easily. So I think it's just a perfect start for luxury and sustainability to come together.
Absolutely. I think food, I completely agree with what you said, like, especially for you, like for us, like, and I think also because we're Indians, I don't know, the reaction to that food thing happens sooner. If you're not well, you change your diet. If you're this, suddenly maybe because of various reasons, our reaction comes there sooner than other, I would say. Maybe I turn more conscious on food, but I'm still, wearing fur, carrying a bag made out of leather, but I'm turning vegetarian on my diet, So I agree with you that reaction over there happens faster. And so maybe brands need to be more also transparent with what is it exactly that they're doing that is making that brand more conscious to the environment, not just in the ingredients, but also the process, also the packaging and A to Z, like everything. So I think if that is done properly, then the elevation, that success, getting that through to the customer is much, much quicker, and it transcends, it gets into their brain much, and it's more believable. So 100% agree with you on that. I think my next, yes, sorry.
More to make on that, which I think is very relevant because overseas, a lot of people have opportunities to indulge and engage in sustainably premium food. Premium food that is sustainable. Those offerings are available overseas and people do indulge with them. I mean, a simple example could be a Whole Foods or a food hall at the Selfridges in UK, where it is very sustainable and people look at it as sustainable luxury. And this has been happening for 15, 20 years now. But in India, I think it's an opportunity, so it just hasn't been tapped yet. But there's no reason to believe that it won't happen. I mean, you have some examples like a food hall, a little bit a Nature's Basket can be probably included in the examples, but I think largely Westerners have a bit more access to luxury food that is sustainable. And growth rates have been phenomenal. If you look at brands in the food industry that are embracing sustainability, they've had very, very healthy, positive growth rates, profitability. And I think that trend is now going to be very relevant in India as well.
It's going to stay, basically.
It is going to stay, yes.
Thank you, Nitin. Moving on to Neeti. I think this is a question that almost every young, emerging talent student at some point in my teaching career has asked me, and I think nobody better than you maybe to explain it to them in a simpler manner probably. What is conscious living? Firstly, I mean, what is conscious living, and can I be a conscious consumer and also a luxury consumer? And as luxury is all about indulgence and extravagance, because when we talk about luxury, it's about excessiveness. So is it possible to consume luxury and be conscious? And what does conscious living actually mean in simpler words?
Okay, so the good news for your students is yes, it's absolutely possible, to be a consumer of luxury and be a conscious consumer. There are enough brands in the market. And the most exciting thing is that in the last few years in India, there's so many premium brands which have come up. If you look at, the slow beauty space, the amount of homegrown brands which are, using eco-cert ingredients, are using botanicals, they are actually suited for Indian skins, and, they maybe have an Ayurvedic or they have a herbal background, and they're all run by women entrepreneurs. So I think that is a very exciting space in India. Of course, the conscious fashion space is also very exciting just now. There's smaller brands, niche brands which are coming up, which cater to the millennial, which are, made from hemp, they're made from GOTS cotton, using organic dyes. I mean, we've seen Ruchika Sachdev in the last few years, when she won awards for bodies, she's using natural dyes, she's working, with weavers, she's doing phenomenal work, and, Rahul Mishra also. So we have a lot of examples in India's fashion industry, in our beauty space, in the food industry, like, Nitin has spoken. There's so many people doing so many things. So what exactly is conscious living? It's living that, where you are interconnected. Man is we're not islands anymore, and we've seen it in the current pandemic, and we've seen it in other places also, that a global world, you're completely interconnected. And what problems happen in the world are your problems too. For example, the Pacific plastic patch, or any other issue, the Rana Plaza issue which happened, the tragedy which happened in Bangladesh. These are issues which affect all of us, and we cannot say, that is your problem, that is our problem too, that is problem of the world and the humanity also. So I think the very fact that when we know that everything is interconnected and we live consciously in that spirit, I think that is conscious living. And when it comes to consumption, I think we need to realize what Gandhi also said, that there's enough for everyone's need, but not enough for everyone's greed. So I think we really need to question, as Abhay spoke and Atif spoke also, do we really need to consume as much? Because I think brands can do that much also, but for us consumers also, we really need to consider that how much are we consuming? And things like the big fat Indian wedding, or excessiveness in terms of maximalization, on the way we spend on our clothes, and the way we spend on other things also. So we really need to consider that, is this consumption sustainable? Because in the long run it isn't. And we've seen it, degradation of forests, we've seen the plastic prices around the world, we've seen the pollution in cities like Delhi, etc. We can't really continue living the way we are. We really need to stop down, pause, and say that, we can't continue like this. We need to really limit what we're doing, and we really need to take considered actions and considered decisions in what we want to spend, what we want to buy on, and what we really want to own. Because in the end, what's happening is that, products are possessing, are our products owning us, or do we own the products? So I think we really need to think about that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Neeti. We're a little bit short on time, and I think we'll also have to take audience questions as well. So whilst we are still on with the webinar, I'd like the audience to already start typing questions on the chat. I can already see a couple of people asking a couple of questions. So if you do have any questions, you can start typing them already, so that we can take that. Probably we can start taking questions at 6 o'clock, which still gives me some time to ask a couple of questions to the panelists. So I think my next question is to Atif and Neeti both. I think Atif, you did talk a little bit about RE, but just a question to you. How did you come up with that logo, like of RE dash? Does it have a meaning? A lot of youngpreneurs, a lot of emerging talents, they constantly have these questions about branding and logo. So if coming from that context, what was the idea behind your logo RE?
So it's really simple. I think it came down to the idea of being simple and sort of stripping all of the fluff away and coming down to what are the nuts and bolts, and what does everything even stand on. And part of an extension of what was being said in the conversation earlier as well is that I think you have to get to a point where, as a brand, you need to start figuring out your accountability and your responsibility. And that's more important than, what is this cotton that my t-shirt is made out of, etc., etc. If you can justify that, if you can be responsible about it. So for that reason, I think all of the words that were summing up what I wanted to do with RE came up with the RE as the beginning. And which is why it was the simplest, smallest, most indivisible part of the mantra that I think the brand is based on. So which is why the logo. The hyphen, of course, is for the fact that we're always in continuity. There is no definitive. So it's a sense of dynamism, which is why. And circularity. So I think that's how the logo came about. And I think that's what the brand is about. That's what the clothes are about. That's what the conversation is about.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us, Atif. Neeti, same question, I think, to you. Beach living, although you did explain us a little bit, how did you, come up with the concept, and did you struggle with deciding that, okay, this is what I'm going with as my brand name or as my, platform name? How did you come about, deciding on, okay, this is it, I'm going with beach living?
Actually, Smita, just came to me, I didn't have to struggle. It just, they say it comes to you in your dreams. So I don't know how it was for Atif, but it happened really naturally. I'm a very connected to soil kind of person. And I thought beach, is the beginning, right? It's from the seed, everything comes to fruition. So for me also, it was, 20 years of working, and it was a fruition of a long cherished dream to actually do something which is deeper, which is more meaningful, and which can grow. So I think beach, and beach, the problem is beach is such a word. There's so many brands which have beach, and I wanted to make it contemporary also. So I felt that, if I just have beach, like a lot of people, it's a global brand. So a lot of people might not understand it. So if I put living as, as a suffix, and this would probably help people, and it would help me also in case if I want to, like we spoke about brand extensions, if I ever wanted to extend it to a different space, to,
Yeah.
to do things with it. So I feel that, something which appeals to, traditions and something which is modern, I thought it was a good mix of that. And, the logo also, it's a small little seed in the center and it's red. I think that also represents
Yeah.
unity and growth. So everything just came about, and, the Hindi font and everything. So I think everything came together beautifully. And it just, the kind of stories and everything came out again, they were very rooted to earth. They were grassroots level. There was not very, high flying luxury. It was very small stories, small people in, things like that. So I think everything just worked out naturally and it just flowed. And then obviously the brand has evolved over time. And I think that happens with every brand. You need to move ahead with times. Like everyone has said in the platform that, but like I said, you just need to keep your soul intact. So, whatever you do, however you move ahead, you need to have, some element of humanity and soul inside your brand.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Neeti. My last question is to Abhay and Nitin both. We have seen a lot of market research about the conscious luxury category increasing. A lot of people have started talking about it, writing about it. There are a lot of figures and statistics being put up, on the net about conscious living, conscious consumer, the growth of that category. When we talk about conscious luxury, how difficult is it for a brand to maintain its legacy or its core and also deliver high quality goods? Is there not a compromise that happens here when you're trying to be conscious and luxury both? So, Nitin, maybe you can start by talking a little bit about Coco-Trade and how did you strike that balance in the,
So, I believe that we are not able to target the luxury consumer as they exist today. So what we've managed to do, though we'd like to, obviously, but what we've managed to do is target a different set of consumers who's not necessarily a premium or a luxury consumer yet, but is a consumer that regards sustainability as one of his priorities and wants to or aspires to indulge with luxury consumers. Now, if I didn't, if I were not sustainable in my offering, I think this segment would be irrelevant to me. And I would like to then target the luxury segment, which I think we would have failed because our proposition is about sustainability and luxury together. So sustainable luxury for us means that we are actually not looking at the traditional luxury market, but we're looking at an aspiring upper middle class, which aspires to be luxuriously spending and also aspires to be caring for the planet. And to me, that's a different or a new niche, if I could call it so. But niche is probably a word that is not stated correctly most of the times, because niche is always connected to something small. Because for us, our experience is that that's growing exponentially. But it's a huge, answering your question, it's a huge challenge to have that balance, because you're not thoroughly convincing a luxury customer, because you're a new player in the market and you're new to them as well. But there is a section of people who regard sustainability more than luxury, and they are your first early adopters. So the early adopters are not the luxury customers for us. It is consumers that want to be sustainable, have not got the opportunity, but would also like to have a luxurious way of spending on food. Having said that, I know I'm making it sound very complicated, but the fact is that it's difficult to satisfy this particular population as of now, because their needs are also evolving.
right.
So it is a challenge, but I think the least and the only thing you could do is give it your all. If I have to just spend half a minute on what we did as a brand, is we've gone overboard when it comes to adding sustainability to a product. So the core of the product is it's a luxurious chocolate, which is the core of the product, but everything around it is sustainable for us. Whether it is sourcing organic ingredients, whether it is reducing the amount of distance our raw materials have to travel to us from the cacao farms to us, whether it is how we package our product, what ink we use, whether we use the inner side of our wrapping. So all of that revolves around sustainability, and all of this becomes a little challenging when you have to put the puzzles together. We hope that consumers will see through it, but I think it's a category that is evolving so fast that we are finding that it's difficult to keep pace with the challenges. But we're doing our best, and I think that's all we could do.
Thank you so much, Nitin. Abhay, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'll add on to what Nitin said. Firstly, if you look at statistics, that you're right, that more and more demand is coming in for sustainability. It is more of a, let's say, it's more of a fancy term, and before the pandemic, most of the brands were treating it through lip service only, whether it was a Marks and Spencer or a Zara or a Louis Vuitton or whatever be the brand. It was more of a lip service. The fact remains, from a commercial perspective, the younger generation is demanding sustainability, but they don't want to pay for it. The fact remains that today being sustainable is an expensive proposition, because the cost of making a sustainable product is extremely high. The viability from a commercial angle is not really true to itself, but you do have examples of brands like a Stella McCartney or other brands coming up with mushroom made leather goods. So it is evolving. It is really evolving. There has been a focus and shift towards animal rights, focus and shift towards how are we killing the animals, how are we treating, and all those things has been happening. But if I change the perspective a little bit and say that sustainability and luxury, when I say luxury, I mean true luxury, and I go back to the origins of luxury, then sustainability and luxury are two sides of the same coin. Because luxury says slow fashion, luxury says carry it over to the next generation, luxury says buy classic products, luxury nowhere says buy fast fashion products. Sustainability says exactly the same things. So because Niti here says I want to bring in slow living, but luxury has always been like that. We say we take 18 months to make a garment. It is fast fashion which says I'll make it in 18 days. So the perspective has changed, and now we are going back towards the original definition of luxury, that it was meant for the few, it was meant for the people who appreciated the artisan behind the product, the art behind the product, and the slow manufacturing behind the product. It's somewhere post the Second World War and post democratization of luxury and post corporatization of luxury, it lost. And we lost, and we got into the race of making money. And that's how we are coming back towards, again, how can we be sustainable? So the point is, Hindi mein kehte hain, jab iti ho gayi hai, ab ant aa gaya hai. To jab ant aa gaya hai, then people will go back to the roots, and that is what is really beginning to happen. But to me, luxury and sustainability are the same things. They should be same. There's no way they are different.
Yeah, I think, thank you so much, Abhay, for that. I think I'm going to start taking a couple of questions now from the audience. We're a little bit extended on the time, but just bear with me for maybe another 7 to 8 minutes, and we'll try to wind up soon. So we'll start with Maitri. I quite like this question of yours. What do you think about brands greenwashing just to picture them as sustainable? If yes, how can we brainstorm people on it? So does anyone have anything to say on that? Brands greenwashing just to picture them as sustainable. I think that they'll get caught very soon, but I'd like to hear from the experts. Because I think I don't know, Abhay, if you agree, but I think as a lecturer, as a mentor, one of the first things that we teach youngpreneurs who are looking at doing luxury startups is be 100% honest with your consumer. Be 100% transparent with your consumer. You cannot lie, So I think they've got another thing coming in. If they are lying and they're trying to brainwash people and that they are misleading people, it's going to come back and bite them. But I'd love to hear something, I'd love to hear from you guys. What do you think about it?
No, I agree with you, Smita, that one needs to be true to himself. I mean, you can make a fool of others, but you cannot really fool yourself. And if you start a business with the intention of fooling others, you're fooling yourself actually, and you're short-lived. So greenwashing, as I said, is a phenomena which was lip servicing the customer, but it is no more. Post the pandemic, I don't think these things are going to hold ground and people will see through them very, very quickly.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Okay. There are a lot of questions. I'm going to take this one. The biggest cliche is always exactly this: sustainability. Okay. I don't think this is a question. I'm sorry.
Smita, I'll just add to one thing that Abhay also was saying about the previous question about greenwashing.
Yes.
And it answers one or two other questions that's on the chat there. So
Sure.
I think the coming trend in luxury, or in general, in luxury more than anywhere else, is accountability. I'm actually personally bored of sustainability. I've heard the word too many times. And I think it's a dead concept now, because like I think Nitin mentioned, it's going to become essential to stay sustainable. Yeah. So the next real trend, I think somebody's asked that question, is accountability, and that's how you take care of greenwashing. If I cannot be accountable for everything that I'm doing, then there is no way I can make those claims. And whether I'm a small brand or a large one, I need to be able to put out everything that I'm doing transparently. And that creates, because the consumer is asking those questions, and you will finally have to answer them at some point. So yeah, for me, the buzzword is accountability.
Absolutely. Thank you, Atif. And I think you did answer a couple of questions. Someone was asking something about trends in sustainability. I think the audience has been pretty responsive. So I'm going to pick up, I can see Purva asking this question about how does new eco-luxury personal care brands make their newer clients aware of the genuine products without being a cliche. So I think what she's trying to talk about is, how do we, educate our new consumers about the fact that she's talking about personal care. So I'm guessing it's
maybe
about.
I can answer that. Maybe.
Yes.
So I think the most interesting case study is the way Nykaa came up and the way Nykaa worked with all the bloggers and the influencers in the market, churning out videos with all these collaborations, actually speaking to them about how to use products, how we can make it look better, doing viral videos, doing other videos. So I think that conversation really spurred, the homegrown beauty market. And this has been going on for the last 3-4 years. And I've seen also on, social media, I think is a great brand discovery tool. And if you see the younger brands which are coming out, they don't need to make the shift to, green credentials or sustainability, because those brands have it built in their very core. So all they have to do is communicate now. And I think younger brands are very agile and they're very millennial focused in how they converse with younger customers. And, they have the young girl problems. They know about acne, they know about, what kind of blush you're wearing, the kind of creams you need. And they're very Indian skin oriented. So I think this entire marketplace, the way they've been marketing, the way they've been selling, the way they've been promoting it, it's a very recent phenomena, and it's a very unique phenomena to the Indian beauty industry. And I think that's how they communicated the message out. So
thank you. That makes a lot of sense. There is this one particular person, I think Abhay Suyash has asked a bunch of questions to you. Probably you can take some of them up. But I think there's one point from, Suyash's messages that I'd like to, in fact, ask all of you that, what kind of advice or guidance he's asking, particularly about the home decor segment. But I think for anybody who's looking at advice or guidance, to an entrepreneur who aspires to establish a luxury brand in the home decor segment. But I would even say, if you have any tips or advice to young brands who want to be in the luxury space, what advice would you give them given today's time, like what we are all going through? So any tips, any advice from any one of you, whoever wants to go first?
I think, Nitin, because you already entered as an entrepreneur, you should probably give them the first piece of advice.
So I can share my experience, if not call it an advice. Anybody who's looking at entering the segment, and I think Atif and even Abhay has mentioned this, that you have to be true to yourself. Do not look at it as a pure play business opportunity, and only if you enter quickly will you be able to make a fast buck, because sustainability is anything but that. For customers to believe you, and that's our experience, for customers to believe you, they have to see through you, and they will research every bit of your offering before they believe that you're sustainable. So it's very easy to get caught red-handed in things that you don't want to get caught red-handed with, because the sustainable luxury consumer is perhaps as particular as a pure play luxury consumer who's maybe not even looking at sustainability, which is fine, but they're as picky because they're going to pay money on a particular category which is probably very new and promises something more than maybe traditional luxury, right? So it's not easy business for sure. So you have to be completely an open book, and literally that's what we are, to an extent that we've also printed on the wrapper where the wrapper gets printed. I think we realized earlier on that when we started selling our products, people used to call and say, listen, I've tasted your chocolates, they're phenomenal, but all the story around your product, how do I get communicated about it? What are the things that I need to know, and how do I believe it? So you have to be an open book. And if you think you cannot be an open book, please don't try to be a sustainable business, because it just doesn't work. You just have to, it's almost like saying everybody needs to know your balance sheet, and that's a fact. Unless they know it, they don't believe you. And unless they believe you, they don't buy from you. So it's not easy business, though it may sound very interesting and people been doing lip service, have managed for a while now. But I think those times are safely behind us, because now customers' voices are much higher. Social media is much more influential in the true sense. So it's not easy business, but a huge opportunity if you have the right attitude to crack it. Because it gets interesting by the day, and it gives an opportunity to learn, maybe do mistakes because you're new to it, but learn and impress upon the audience. And they're very rewarding. There's one thing I think I must leave this comment with is sustainable luxury consumers are extremely rewarding. And I think that should motivate anybody enough to be an open book and look at this as a pure play, long-term, honest business opportunity.
Absolutely. I think, thank you, Nitin. We almost, I think, very much exceeded on the time limit. So last couple of messages, notes, anything to the audience before we just stop for a group picture. Anybody wants to say anything to the audience? I think the last statement by Suyash is quite interesting. Green is the new black, he says. Product sustainability, comment. I think green is definitely going to be the primary color in terms of using it as marketing, using it for marketing, not just in the literal sense, but thinking green and feeling green and feeling positive. I think it will definitely be. But any last bit of advice, any last bit of tips for any last bit of messages for our audiences from you guys?
So
Neeti, Abhay, yes, Nitin.
I just read something which Rajesh Anireddy had mentioned about sustainability and commercial viability not going together. That's absolutely true. But what I've also seen is that now India has a lot more startups, a lot more entrepreneurs, a lot more people who get inspired by stories they hear and see. And I think a few brands waking up and saying, listen, I'm sustainable and I'm making this effort also inspires a lot of entrepreneurs. It's not just consumers that get inspired, even entrepreneurs get inspired. And I think in the sustainable luxury space, supply can drive demand to a very, very honest extent. All this while I was not buying sustainable luxury products because they were simply not available, right? Today, if there's an option, I would at least definitely evaluate it, because I can't be told that I'm doing wrong if I evaluate a sustainable luxury product. I could be told I'm doing wrong if you're buying a product that is not sustainable, but not the other way around, right? So I think supply will drive demand, and hence viability, like every other business, will happen over a period of time. And there's huge prospects to it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nitin. Yes, Neeti, you were saying something.
I just wanted to add that from a consumer point of view, consumers need to understand that sustainability is a very ambiguous term. There is no clear-cut definition or certifications in India that, XYZ is going to be completely sustainable. But you will have ingredients that are sustainable, maybe you have textiles that are sustainable. And smaller brands also cannot afford to get those certificates. So I think consumers need to be very aware that, a brand might claim sustainable credentials, but at the same time might not be able to support it because, lack of funds. Or also, they might just be greenwashing, like everyone has said. So I think for a consumer, you really need to be very, you need to have your research up there. You need to know what that stand for, what certain certifications stand for, and the entire storytelling of a brand. I think that's very important, how a brand communicates to you also. Are they telling the truth? Are they really getting the cotton, from a sustainable farm somewhere in Telangana? Is it got certified? Is it actually being made by certain artisans as the claim as it's being done? A lot of brands, at least internationally, give you the factories they're being made in, they give you the dyers they've been dyed with, they give you all that information. In India, it will take time. It is happening, but it's going to take time. So I think the best arsenal for consumers is to be informed. And brands today are very open, very accessible. Like I said, a lot of these younger, premium, affordable luxury brands, they have young people, the millennials. You just shoot an email to them, be more involved, ask them questions, and they'll be very happy to answer it to you. I'm sure people ask Nitin questions, they'll be more than happy to tell them, about their brand, because it's in the end, it's their passion, right? They're very passionate about their business, so they're authentic. They will anyway tell you the story upfront. So I think consumers need to be much more involved in what they're buying, and in the end it is for your own good. You're going to apply it to your skin, you're going to be eating it, you're going to be wearing it, your children are going to be wearing it. So I think all these points need to be taken into consideration.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Neeti. Absolutely 100% correct. Ateev, Abhay, anything from your side to our audiences before we sign off?
Yeah, so I'd just like to add to what Nitin and Neeti said out here. You see, it's all linked to the economics of the country. Why is it that India does not have a Greta Thunberg? It's because she's from Sweden, where the economy is super high, and she has the time, and her parents have the time to train her and think her on these lines. In India, while we are having a very intellectual debate out here, but we are not even countable in the percentage population of India. So the majority of Indians today don't think of sustainability, but they think of survival. So when you're thinking of survival, then you don't think of buying Nitin's chocolate. You think of buying whatever chocolate comes your way in the amount of money that is available in your pocket. So we are a far way away from actually becoming a sustainable country, because firstly, we have to get out of the poverty zone. Secondly, we have to come into a zone where economics permit that we have the spare money to look at sustainable products and sustainable behavior, sustainable living, etc., etc. Once we get into that stage of economic evolution, I think that's the time when sustainability will escalate and it will really become for everyone. Today, it is for a handful of people. That's why it's being positioned as luxury. But it is sustainable living is not luxury. I mean, you have examples internationally where the entire countries are living in a sustainable manner. I mean, you look at Tibet, or you look at Japan, where the younger people are going towards minimalistic living, and they're not buying anything because they've probably seen it all. Once you've seen it all, and when you have crossed the threshold level, then you come back and say, well, what is the beauty of all this? Today, we all craving, we want. Or they do, even your Coke says, Dil Bange more. So we keep on asking for more and more and more. So I think we are in that stage of evolution. After all, we are very young. We're just 70 years old since partition. So I think maybe next 20, 30 years, once the economy really booms, because luxury sustainability is not a bang, bam, thank you, ma'am kind of affair. It is very slow courtship. It has to be built over a period of time. You must have deep pockets to sustain it, and you must be true to your brand. So those are certain requirements without which you cannot become luxury or sustainable.
Absolutely. Thank you, Abhay, for that. Ateev, last bits to you.
Yeah, some fantastic points made here by everyone. I'd just like to evolve on one thing that you had started the conversation with, Smita, was that luxury comes across as something that is non-essential in times like this, and not to be tone deaf to what is happening in our country. But I think one of the things that I've learned, and that's also what has changed my view on what is luxury. In fact, I sometimes find the word a little too archaic for my usage. And with all due respect to everything, I've learned new meanings of what I would consider luxury for myself through this entire transition that we're going through. And to extend that, what I feel is when the dust settles, when that initial adrenaline rush of survival that Abhay was talking about, when that subsides, the thing that takes us into the next sphere of exchange, of any form of engagement, is what has been sustaining us, which somewhere is encapsulated into what luxury is. So the ateliers that have been working over, I don't know, the last couple of decades, close to a century, to preserve certain crafts, they become the vanguards of what will be next, because that is what survives. It's not just because it's funded, it's actually because that's the truest expression of the human spirit. So I think we need to reevaluate or rehash that luxury meaning for ourselves. And when we do, we really realize what's worth giving our, or where you put your money down, like, what's really worth your investment. And then the value of something becomes very, very clear. So I don't think luxury is in any way an excess or a frivolity. It's not something that comes at the forefront when you need to be saved in survival mode. But when the dust settles, it's the only thing that takes you forward.
Absolutely. I think very similar to what even Neeti touched upon in the beginning of the debate, that truest form of luxury, craftsmanship, all of that. And absolutely agree with all of you. I mean, luxury has no single definition. It has many, many different meanings to different kinds of people coming from different cultures. And I think, I think you all had very, very important points. We covered really, really a lot, thanks to all of you. We spoke about entrepreneurship, we spoke about sustainable living, we spoke about conscious consumption, we spoke about better buying principles, we spoke about branding. I think almost all the topics that we wanted to cover, we did cover, and I hope that did help the audiences. As I said, I did recognize a lot of people from the audiences that I've interacted with previously who are probably on the verge of establishing their own brand. So I'm happy that this conversation happened with a bunch of you.